With world-class expertise and local insight, Dexus creates value, not just for today, but long into tomorrow.
From Barangaroo Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hello and welcome to the COB this Thursday afternoon. I'm Juliette Sarli. Let's have a quick look at where the local market is tracking 0.2% higher there on the CIBO 200, but the ASX 200 retesting that 3-month high, up 18 points, 0.2%, 8,415 points. Some very solid moves coming through on the markets today, and more broadly across Asia as well, because this is, of course, after we heard that news that the Court of International Trade has found that US President Trump overstepped his authority by imposing across-the-board duties on imports from US trading partners. So essentially declaring President Trump's tariffs potentially not being legal. All right, let's have a look at some of the themes of the day that is really legally blocked here. Of course, we are awaiting to hear what the president himself says. The White House has indicated that, of course, they will be opposing this and coming back in terms of saying that they do think that the tariffs are legal, but certainly have seen some upside coming through more broadly in markets on the back of this news. A couple of analysts out there saying that the rally that you saw in NASDAQ futures, more a tech story on the back of what we had from Nvidia overnight, really a little bit of tariff fatigue as well to this potential court challenge. But Nvidia did give a good nudge coming through to a lot of the tech players locally as well. It beat expectations with its quarterly sales. Customers really stocking up here on AI chips before these tariffs come into effect. But Nvidia's guidance or forward-looking outlook did miss expectations, and that is, of course, due to the expected impact of the tariffs. And then we're seeing some big moves coming through in copper too, and that is following an upgrade from Chile. Let's have a quick look at where copper stocks are tracking this afternoon. And Capstone Copper up 5%. Now, Sandfire Resources is weaker. It doesn't operate in Chile, but in Australia, US, Spain and Botswana. Hot Chile up 10%. It is in Chile. And Arias Resources there down by about 3%. Also watching some very solid moves coming through in the energy sector today. That has certainly helped buoy the overall market to these 3-month highs. The oil price and energy stocks in general doing very well today. Having a look at the tech players, of course, being boosted for the most part from Nvidia's move. Tech One there up by 1.4%, Zip up by almost 4%. And the banks back in the black as well, led by CBA again, getting close to those record highs, up 1/3 of 1%, $174.36. Now, looking at some of the other stocks we've been watching, the ACCC did raise concerns about Elders' proposed acquisition of Delta Agribusiness. Despite that, Elders shares are actually higher today, $6.28. Select Harvest, though, going the other way, despite the fact that it is actually back in the black and it swung to a half-year profit up from a loss in the prior period. Champion Iron, well, it posted a near 40% drop in full-year net profit, but it did announce a pretty decent dividend of 10 Canadian cents, shares up 1%. Resolute Mining, though, weaker. This is on reports of Guinea revoking exploration permits. And we just spoke to Arawa Biosurgery. They're expecting revenue growth of 10 to 20% thanks to the sale of their Myriad product. Shares up by around 13%. The stock of the day was Clarity Pharmaceuticals, and this is on the back of an encouraging start to its imaging trial of recurrence of prostate cancer in patients. And Grady Wolf from Bell Direct and Andrew Coleman from Tip Group joined Koshi on the call.
If it's phase 1, really good results, it's good, but it's not be all end all. Right. You want to see phase 3 commercialisation plans, FDA approval in the works, that's where you want to be looking.
So you'd have a buy on this?
Buy, a spec buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. For clarity, they did receive the fast track approval for FDA clearance. So when you have that, it means you're in constant communication with the FDA.
Right. So that's shorter than
the 3 to 4. But again, it's as Andrew said, it's a really tough one to get through. Yeah. It's not guaranteed. It's a good step, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, right.
But I think to me, biotechs in general, they are wonderful things. They change the world, but they are gambles. Yeah. And so, I tend to personally take the view that I would rather give my money to early stage cancer research as a charitable donation, because I feel at least at that point, if the trials don't succeed and the opportunities don't matter, I went into it knowing this was a donation rather than convincing myself it's an investment.
All right, let's welcome to the COB David Lane from Ordminet. Hi, David. Are you surprised that we didn't see as big of a jump potentially that we might have on markets on this news that Trump's global tariffs have been deemed illegal, or are we all getting a little bit of tariff fatigue?
I think the latter is definitely the case. I think the tariff fatigue and trying to work out on a daily basis what the impacts could be. I think the market is probably a little bit over that and focusing more on local issues. As we know, Australia, by comparison to the rest of the world, sits pretty well as far as the tariffs are concerned. I think this daily game of trying to predict has become a little bit too wearing for the market.
Yeah, what are they calling him now? Taco Trump. Okay, well, let's talk about some of the fundamentals. Copper and energy very much in focus today.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, the energy stocks did very well. Woodside continued on from its positive move yesterday after the federal government extended the Northwest Shelf. So that's positive news as far as Woodside is concerned specifically, but more generally, the oil price jumped last night. So we saw good moves from not only Woodside, but Santos and many of the other energy players. And as you said, copper was also fairly strong. But on the flip side, gold was quite a bit weaker. So we saw that risk-off trade happening overnight, and many of the gold stocks were sold off in Australia as a result.
I want to get your thoughts on the retail stocks, because that interesting move yesterday from Myer about health and well-being, beauty bars, nail bars, really trying to get people into shopping centres. Is this what's needed for retailers to stay ahead of the pack? And of course, we've got retail trade data tomorrow.
It's probably what's needed strategically. I think one of the big issues with retailers in Australia is that spending isn't that high at the moment, and we're actually looking at some GDP figures or growth figures at the moment, and anticipating that the first quarter and second quarter this year are going to be fairly muted, and potentially could even play into the RBA thinking as far as their growth forecasts are concerned, because it actually looks as if Australians are now saving more money, maybe delaying some decisions as far as their spending is concerned, which is a bit of a concern for the retailers medium term.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we need to talk about tech as well. We are obviously not quite as tech heavy as the US, but that Nvidia result and the 5% spike after hours lifting some of the tech stocks here too.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it's certainly positive from that point of view. We saw some moves of a number of the data centres here in Australia. NextDC was actually off a little bit, but Digico, which listed late last year, had a fairly strong day. Many of the other tech stocks did quite well. We did see, although it's not a tech stock, but Goodman, which announced yesterday, was a little bit weaker. It has an exposure to data centres as well. But yeah, a little bit of a mixed bag there as far as the Australian techs are concerned.
What about Elders? I mean, interesting that it rose despite the ACCC concern.
Yes, you're right. Some concerns there about their acquisition, and look, I think overall the environment for Elders isn't too bad, but yeah, definitely it was unusual to see that movement in the market today, given that the ACCC said that they are investigating whether or not they're able to go ahead with that takeover.
All right, well, tomorrow, David, is the final trading day of May. It looks like we didn't sell in May and go away. We're at a 3-month high.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, probably quite surprisingly, given everything that's been going on, given all of the uncertainty around, we have seen, some reasonably positive moves in the market. CBA and the other banks have still held up there in spite of the fact that they're fairly expensive. Some of the other big stocks, though, the resource companies, BHP and Rio, were off a little bit today. But generally, I think there's still a reasonably positive feel in the market at the moment. And as I said, we're probably starting to focus a little bit more on local issues, not as concerned about what's happening in the US. But that's today. That could well change over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what the president says overnight. They are talking about potentially the Supreme Court now. All right, David, thank you. As always, David Lane from Ord Minnett there with us. As I mentioned, a 3-month high on the market today. Let's have a look at the leaders in the session, and Capstone Copper very much on that tailwind you're seeing in these copper players on that upgrade from Chile. Zip taking that lead from Nvidia and other tech stocks, along with the likes of Block, which is up 3%, just under $100. Paladin Energy, though, lower. A lot of the uranium players coming under pressure after a big sharp run up over the past week or so. Telix Pharmaceuticals down 3%. In the small end of town, Shine Justice had a good day. Now, Aroa Biosurgery, we just spoke to them. They had an interesting update, sending their shares up by 13%. Findi, I believe, might report tomorrow, up 9%, $5.08. To the downside, Coronado Global Resources didn't have a great session. And then, as I mentioned, some of those uranium players coming off following the very solid rally they've had in the past week or so after President Trump signed executive orders aiming to restart America's nuclear capability. Tonight, US GDP for the March quarter, a 0.3% contraction expected to show continued weakness, of course, in the overall US economy. Pending home sales expected to dip by about 1.1%. And a big night of earnings. Now, not just Costco and Dell, you've got the likes of Best Buy, Foot Locker, Gap, so a lot on the retail consumer front, which will be interesting amidst that GDP print. Also Marvel Technology coming through as well. Tomorrow we've got retail trade for April. Retail spending expected to increase by 0.5% according to CommSec. Building approvals could fall by 1%. And then yes, Findi will come through with those earnings. Maybe somebody knows something, seeing as Findi shares were up by something like 5% today. All right, the overall market is higher by 0.2% there on the CBO 200. The ASX 200 finishing higher 18 points at a fresh it's finished higher by 13 points or 0.2%, 8,409, a fresh 3-month high. Those copper stocks certainly lifting the market, and we will continue to monitor developments out of the US. Futures are higher after a vast majority of Donald Trump's global tariffs were deemed illegal and blocked by the trade court, so easing some of these concerns about the economic outlook in the US, although we are hearing that there is likely very much to be a appeal from the president, and Bloomberg is reporting the US Supreme Court may ultimately have the final say in this high-stakes case that could impact trillions of dollars in global trade. We will bring you all of that from tomorrow, 9:45 a.m. See you then.